Stephen Carter had become a frequent visitor to the cemetery. Almost every day, whenever his health allowed, he would come to the grave of his son, William. A year had passed since William's death, and Stephen felt it was his duty to visit him. But on this particular day, his legs gave out. If not for a passing girl who happened to notice him, he might never have made it to his feet again. The girl turned out to be a kind soul and a good listener. Stephen, grateful and eager to talk, began to share his story. He had lived in the same village all his life. It was where he met his wife Anne, and where they raised their son. But despite all their hopes and efforts, William had turned out to be a miserable man, a drunk, a disappointment. Stephen was a respected man, hard-working, honest. Everyone in the village looked up to him. But he had never found the time to raise his son properly. He worked endlessly, trying to provide for his family. And now all that was left for him was to sigh and stew in regret. That day William had come home drunk, again. Anne couldn't bear the sight of him anymore. Her heart ached with pain and shame. But more than that, she felt disgusted, powerless. She had no one to turn to. She couldn't even confide in Stephen. She knew how firm and bitter he had become when it came to their son. William started asking for money. Anne cursed him and went back into the house. But of course that didn't stop him. He needed to drink and would stop at nothing. Anne knew what came next. William dropped to his knees and began to beg, crying, pleading, humiliating himself. He didn't care who stood before him, mother or stranger, as long as he got what he wanted. Anne could see the madness in his eyes. He was completely unhinged that day. Desperate, she called for Stephen. Stephen rushed in to help, but William was young, strong, and angry. He shoved his father so hard, Stephen collapsed to the floor and couldn't get up. William didn't even glance back. He took the money from the table and left. Stephen remained on the floor, paralyzed. The impact had triggered a stroke. He spent weeks in the hospital, and when he returned, it was with a grim diagnosis. He would never fully recover. From that day on, William considered himself the head of the household. He mocked his father, sometimes cruelly, sometimes carelessly, as if Stephen were a piece of old furniture. He seemed to enjoy it. All the things he'd once been too afraid to say, he now hurled at his bedridden father without restraint. Stephen endured it all, silent, powerless. He couldn't move, couldn't respond. He simply waited to die. Night after night he prayed for death, and one night it came. He saw her, a woman in the darkness, radiant, silent. She stood at the foot of his bed and looked down at him with calm, empty eyes. That same night, Stephen told Anne that his time had come. He asked her forgiveness for everything, for the things he did and didn't do, for the kind of son he had raised. Anne tried to comfort him, told him he would recover, but Stephen knew better. The next morning he felt worse than ever. His vision blurred, his head swam. But Anne had to go. Her sister was sick in the city. She didn't want to leave him, but Stephen insisted. He wanted to die alone, quietly, without making a scene. Shortly after she left, William returned, drunk again, and this time he brought friends. They settled in the kitchen and started drinking. William didn't care that his father was lying helpless in the next room, didn't even acknowledge him. Eventually, when the snacks ran out, William stumbled into the room, took some food, tossed a few insults at his father, and went back to his buddies. But then, toward the end of the bottle, William had a thought. Maybe he should include the old man, share a drink, be generous. He brought a glass of vodka to Stephen and offered it. Stephen couldn't even lift his head. That only irritated William. He tried to force it down his father's throat. When that failed, he lost his temper, dragged Stephen out of bed and onto the cold floor. "This used to be your bed," he mumbled. "Now it's mine." Stephen, humiliated and afraid, crawled beneath the bed. It took everything he had. He was terrified that William would step on him in a drunken stupor. Soon after, William's friends left. There was nothing left to drink, and the host was already passed out. Stephen waited for Anne, waited for death. Then the door creaked open. A soft light flooded the room, and she was there, the same woman from his dream, Death. Stephen tried to scream to tell her he was under the bed, but he couldn't. A moment later, he heard William begin to choke. A horrible gurgling sound, and then silence. Stephen lay under the bed for hours, paralyzed with fear. When Anne returned home, she immediately sensed what had happened. The house stank of alcohol, dishes scattered, the smell of smoke. She found William lying in Stephen's bed. She tried to wake him. Nothing. She found Stephen under the bed, eyes wide open, lips trembling. And then she touched William. He was ice cold. The autopsy said he had choked on his own vomit. But Stephen knew the truth. Death had come, but it took the wrong soul. On the day of the funeral, Stephen stood up for the first time in months. He didn't get his strength back, but he could walk. He could feed himself. Washington sit on a bench, visit the grave. And now he comes here every day, not out of grief, but out of guilt. He believes William took his place in the afterlife, that death made a mistake. And until it comes again, Stephen will pay his debt. Because he was the one who called for it. He just didn't know how high the price would be.